You rebel scum.
Scum?
After my E.T. related episode, I thought it might be interesting to take a look at some other novelizations I had lying around and see what we can learn from them. What deleted scenes are chronicled within their pulp-infested pages? What interiority will bring us new insights into the characters? I'm not a fan of omnibus editions, but when I was a kid with no income, it was much easier to convince my parents to buy me one book instead of three. So here we have a beat-up, nearly 40-year-old copy of the 10th anniversary edition of the Star Wars Novelizations. This book came out in the peak of the dark times, and even then Lucasfilm was branding conscious enough to come up with a 10th anniversary logo and an ad for a commemorative poster on the back. No, I did not get the poster. My parents barely got me the book. It was only $9.95. Oh, $24.95 for a limited edition series of 1,500, signed by the artist. It was John Alvin, who's done some posters. Yeah, there's also the Hamilton collection plates. I think you can get all those plates on eBay for pretty cheap now. Nobody collects plates anymore. Before the cover falls off or the first half of Star Wars breaks free from the binding, let's take a look. And spoilers, all the big reveals are in Return of the Jedi.
Star Wars, the saga begins.
There's really nothing earth-shattering here, besides the Death Star, but we already knew that. The Gilligan hat scene is not a big deal. Luke sees the space battle while working on the farm. The big scenes are a bigger deal, since they provide more dimension for Luke and obviously Biggs.
I didn't come back just to say goodbye. I shouldn't tell you this, but you're the only one I can trust. See, I may never come back, and I just want someone to know.
What are you talking about?
I made some friends at the Academy. When our frigate leaves for one of the central systems, we're gonna jump ship and join the Alliance.
The rebellion?
Quiet down, will you? You got a mouth bigger than a meteor.
I'm quiet. Listen how quiet I am. You can barely hear me.
It was an easy decision for George to cut all this because the film was pretty slow on the 572nd watch. I'm sure you've noticed. But at least we have the deleted scenes. Back when I was a kid, all we had was the Star Wars storybook. Yeah. See, we can see here Luke in his Gilligan hat watching the space battle. Luke talking to Biggs. So we had some access to these scenes, but it wasn't until we got the deleted scenes on the Blu-ray that we really officially got to see. Ducks, Obi-Wan says. Still, even a duck has to be taught to swim. What's a duck? Luke asked curiously. This, of course, has since been reinforced by subsequent events that took place previously.
We can't get the shield generator fixed, we'll be sitting ducks.
Ducks are canon. This one was interesting to me. Your father's lightsaber, Kenobi told him. At one time, they were widely used, still are in certain galactic quarters. This makes Obi-Wan's use of the lightsaber in the cantina make a little more sense. It's not exclusively a Jedi weapon, so it wouldn't be quite so notable. Still notable, but not as egregious as whipping it out in the middle of the cantina like that. Makes you think. I don't think I've seen this referenced anywhere else, but it makes a lot of sense that Mos Eisley would be mostly underground since, planet's a very arid desert conditions. Nobody wants to be out in that all day. Just a fun fact. Beyond the scene where Biggs introduces Luke to Red Leader, which was added in the special edition for no real reason that I can figure out. It's kind of useless without the other big scenes, but it's something. Here's a scene you haven't seen before. Yeah.
I met your father once when I was just a boy. He was a great pilot. You've got half the skill he had, you'll do all right.
There's a bunch of extra back and forth between the pilots during the trench run. It doesn't add much. Some character names, not a big deal.
The Empire Strikes Back.
If you see the behind-the-scenes footage and read the making-of books like Once Upon a Galaxy by Alan Arnold, or the definitive work, The Making of Empire Strikes Back by J.W. Rinsler, which is basically a deluxe version of Once Upon a Galaxy, you'll learn that director Irvin Kershner worked with the actors on the dialogue a lot, and Harrison Ford especially was fond of stripping Han's dialogue down to the bare minimum. It doesn't seem like it in the movie, but that's the point. It wasn't necessary dialogue. So the book doesn't have the cut subplot where the Wampas infest Echo Base, which is a lot of fun. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, the Wampas didn't really work. So they couldn't get it to go. But instead, there's this weird scene where a probe droid kills a Wampa. Just cause. I'm guessing this was for merchandising purposes or something, but the book seems to want to make sure you know that 2-1B is the name of the medical droid, and that Zuckuss and Dengar are the bounty hunters, though the book mistakenly describes Zuckuss as human. They didn't know. They're just writing stuff. However, the book fails to mention Lobot by name, so it's not firing on all cylinders, I guess. Was Lobot even named at that time? I don't think he was. Was he? He must have been. He's Lobot. Now I'm wondering. What was the action figure's name? Was the action figure's name Lobot? Must have been. Future me in the edit will figure it out. If you're enjoying this video, why not buy my book? Flight of the Pangolin is the story of an intrepid group of heroes who decide to exit the solar system over the objections of an isolationist faction. There's actually a lot more going on than that. There's space pirates, a giant spider for no reason, all kinds of other things. Buy it now online wherever you buy books or at our website, www.thepangolinrepublic.com. You can also get fun t-shirts and random other stuff if you want.
Return of the Jedi.
So the Return of the Jedi novelization was written by James Caan. Not that James Caan. Come on. He seems to have taken his job very, very seriously. We get a lot more in depth into what the characters are thinking, especially Lando. Lando's a big character in this book. He thinks about everything from an odds or gambling angle. I'll read a short excerpt here. Lando had managed to infiltrate this nest of maggots months earlier to see if it was possible to free Solo from Jabba's imprisonment. He'd done this for several reasons. First, because he felt, correctly, that it was his fault that Han was in this predicament, and he wanted to make amends, provided, of course, he could do so without getting hurt. Blending in here, just like one of the pirates, was no problem for Lando, though. Mistaken identity was a way of life with him. Second, he wanted to join forces with Han's buddies at the top of the Rebel Alliance. They were out to beat the Empire, and he wanted nothing more in his life now than to do just that. The Imperial police had moved in on his action once too often, so this was a grudge match now. Besides, Lando liked being part of Solo's crowd, since they seemed to be right up at the business end of all the action against the Empire. Third, Princess Leia had asked him to help, and he just never could refuse a princess asking for help. Besides, you never knew how she might thank you someday. Finally, Lando would have bet anything that Han simply could not be rescued from this place, and Lando just plain couldn't resist a bet. So he spent his days watching a lot, watching and calculating. That's what he did now. As Chewie was led away, he watched, and then he faded into the stonework. We also learn what the Battle of Tanab was all about, so that's fun. Lots of good Lando stuff here. And everybody in general has more interiority, so it's more of an interesting read. You get a lot more information. So remember when I said that the Empire Strikes Back novelization was very much into naming characters. Well, now they've gone overboard. This probably is for marketing reasons. Not every background character has a name, but way more than would be typical for a book. I mean, most of the people around Jabba the Hutt seem to get named even though they don't actually do anything. You know, they're just there. And it's like, hey, that's this guy and this guy. You know, like the action figure that you just bought at the store, or your mom got you for 50 cents. I don't know why they did this. It's kind of hard to read, but it's fun. It's kind of fun. It's unnecessary. I mean, you could just say R2 bleeped, R2 blurped, but instead they say I don't know if this was in a script ever, or if it ever got filmed, or what, but this line of dialogue has haunted me for like 40 years, and no one has picked up this thread and expanded on it, which is surprising because I think you could mine this for a lot of story. I'll read it here. Luke let all the rest of the motley horde that surrounded him melt into the recesses of his consciousness to let Jabba fill his mind totally. You will bring Captain Solo and the Wookiee to me. Jabba smiled grimly. Your mind powers will not work on me, boy. I am not affected by your human thought pattern. Then, as an afterthought, I was killing your kind back when being a Jedi meant something. Somebody make that movie. How is Jabba the Hutt going around killing Jedi? Is he doing it himself? Is he more mobile? Is he hiring people to do it for him? There's a lot you could do with that. Somebody do that. I figured Clone Wars would do something with it, but they never did. So, there are 3 Moff Jerjerots. Alright? There's the one in the movie. Just this guy desperately trying to get the Death Star built.
But he asked the impossible. I need more men.
That's his whole thing.
We shall double our efforts.
There's one in the deleted scenes where he's a bit more sympathetic and conflicted about turning the Death Star towards Endor.
Yes, Your Highness. But we have several battalions stationed on the moon.
You will destroy it.
Yes, Your Highness.
And then there's the book version where he's a sadistic turbo-fascist murdermonger. I won't read the scenes, but he's a very unpleasant person. So the Ewoks start worshipping 3PO, and then he says,
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
but then somehow his programming got on board with rationalizing his new godhood with remarkable speed. Like, within a few paragraphs in the same scene. I'm not going to read it. So in the movie, 3PO tells him the story of the film series so far. And then the Ewoks are like, oh, okay, sounds good. You're part of the tribe. Let's go get him. But in the book, there's like 4 pages of deliberating. It's good character work for Han, who talks about the changes he went through in his life, and now he's joined the rebels. And Leia says, do it for the trees. Do it for the trees. The Ewoks are completely unswayed until they hear an impassioned speech from everyone's favorite hero, the young warrior Wicket. We all love Wicket. Here is that speech in its entirety. Eep eep, meep eep, squee. 3PO translated for his friends. Honorable elders, we have this night received a perilous, wondrous gift. The gift of freedom. This golden god... Here 3PO paused in his translation just long enough to savor the moment, then went on. This golden god, whose return to us has been prophesied since the first tree, tells us now he will not be our master, tells us we are free to choose as we will, that we must choose, as all living things must choose.
3 weeks later.
Send the fear of chaos into the hearts of our enemies. Yet we do change color even as the season calls upon us to change. So we must help our Leaf brothers, these rebels, for so has come a season of change upon us. This guy, he's just a kid. Anyways, that whole discussion took up like 4 pages of deliberating, and I'm very glad that they ripped those pages out of the script. So this is a thing that got lost in the edit of Return of the Jedi. And while it solves a lot of continuity and plot hole issues, I can see why they had to do it for pacing reasons. For the first time the Death Star rocked, the collision with the exploding destroyer was only the beginning, leading to various systems breakdowns, which led to reactor meltdowns, which led to personnel panic, abandonment of posts, further malfunctions, and general chaos. Smoke was everywhere. Substantial rumblings came from all directions at once. People were running and shouting. Electrical fires, steam explosions, cabin depressurizations, disruption of chain of command. Added to this, the continued bombardments by rebel cruisers, smelling fear in the enemy, merely heightened the sense of hysteria that was already pervasive. For the Emperor was dead. The central, powerful evil that had been the cohesive force to the Empire was gone. And when the dark side was this diffused, this non-directed, this was simply where it led. Confusion, desperation, damp fear. So in the book, the deflector shield protecting the Death Star was up until the Emperor's death. Han's strike team, aided by, of course, everyone's favorite murder bears, only defeats the Legion of the Emperor's best troops and destroys the shield generator after the Emperor was defeated. Or at least these things were happening concurrently. So if you want to know how the Ewoks can beat stormtroopers, that's pretty much how. But this doesn't work pacing-wise for the movie. The victories have to build up, and the biggest victory has to be the Emperor's death. So I guess we can say that in the movie, the Emperor was so focused on the duel between Luke and Vader that he was letting things slip. I don't know. Basically, George was probably in the edit room and so sick of Star Wars at that point that he was just like, whatever. So those are the interesting details I was able to glean from the novelizations of the original Star Wars trilogy. One last thing I wanted to save until the end was from the prologue to the Star Wars novelization. The prologue is wildly overcome by subsequent canon events describing the Empire's rise in very different terms, and claiming to be an excerpt from the first saga of the Journal of the Wills. But one thing I always liked was this quote from Princess Leia, which is still canon. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Naturally, they became heroes. So that's all for this one. Join us in the next thrilling episode of Mike's Book Report, where I talk to you about a book you haven't thought about in...